the nice thing about it is I've never failed to be able to locate that when I've been in a large, mall or big box store parking lot or whatever. When I come out with my hands full of things, I can always spot my vehicle. So
and you don't have to worry about anybody stealing it.
No, you could leave the keys in it probably. So anyway.
You are listening to Manager Brothers Lessons Learned. Twice each month, Gregg and Jae draw on their combined 80-plus years of state and local government work experience to help listeners avoid the pitfalls they and others have unwittingly stumbled into. And now, on to the episode.
Welcome to another episode of Manager Brothers Lessons Learned. This is Gregg Jae.
And this is Jae Jae.
We're back to talking about manager contracts again, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the fringe benefit issues that can come up. One of the things that I've seen, and I'm interested in your take on this, but one of the things that I've seen that city attorneys or village attorneys will put into proposed contracts with managers is a stipulation that when it comes to fringe benefits, whatever's in the personnel manual for department heads is what the city manager or the village manager is going to get. What is your thought about that?
When we first mentioned of this being our topic for today, my concern, of course, is if, especially in smaller communities, I think it's more problematic. You have a set number of fringe benefits for employees in general, and if you have different sets of fringe benefits for whether it's department heads or in this case we're talking about village or city managers, what kind of conflict that can create for the other employees. So that's always a concern, and I guess where I've worked in small communities, my benefits have been pretty much, I would say, identical to those of the other staff. It might be a little bit different when you're talking about having an initial paid time off available. A lot of times that's an incentive for managers, and we can talk about that separately. But I think what you're talking about are benefits, whether it's insurance and life insurance and health insurance and those types of things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess my view about that is that I think there's some good reason to adhere to certain standards of benefits, certain benefit programs that would be just problematic for the municipality if you had to create a new one just for the manager. And health insurance is a good example of that. Do you really want to have one health insurance plan that applies to every other employee, but you're going to have a separate one that applies to the manager?
Right.
That having been said, one of the things that happens, particularly I think in larger municipalities, is that you will have different health insurance plans depending on the union and what the union has negotiated, and so there might be some greater capacity within that municipality to have the manager tag on to one of their existing plans, in which case you want to find out what they are and perhaps choose the one that is most favorable to the manager. Places that I've worked, I tried to eliminate all the differences in the plans and get to one standard plan, primarily because of and this had to do with vision insurance and life insurance and other kinds of, in addition to health insurance. But one of the reasons for that is we were dealing with small municipalities with limited capacity to kind of keep track of all of the different components of these varied plans. And so I found that it was useful to say, look, this is a burden on the administrative staff in the clerk's office or the treasurer's office or wherever it was to keep track of all these plans. Let's standardize those. In a situation like that, where there's one plan and it applies to everybody, I think that it's the manager might want some differences, but I'm not sure that that's something that I, as a manager, would go looking for. As long as it meets kind of the basic threshold of what you need there, I'd say, stick with what that main plan is, and don't vary too far from that. And I think that what that implies, by the way, is that as a manager is beginning the process of negotiating his or her contract with that municipality, get a hold of the personnel manual. Make sure you understand what's in it, and don't be afraid to ask for some additional information. So, get whatever information might be available in terms of the benefits that the benefit descriptions that are handed out to employees during open enrollment periods or whatever.
Yeah, and just to backtrack on a part of something a thought that I had as you were talking too, having worked in very small communities, one of the things that especially in the last community I was in, you're looking at various plans, whether it's health insurance or life insurance and various types of things like that. When you get into where you have 10 or fewer employees, the availability of companies that provide coverage for small group members like that get to be challenging, and I'm not sure how that figures in then with the manager. If the manager becomes part of that pool and you're still under 10 employees, the municipality may not have many options available. So then you have to look at, do they just offer a more of a cash incentive as part of their compensation, and the manager goes out on their own and gets some kind of supplemental policies or whatever. But
right.
That's just something to think about. And I think I've talked with other managers, maybe other elected officials even, about whether there could be a different way of offering a larger pool so that you aren't limited to just those 10 employees or less in a small community. If you have a number of small communities that opt into the same plan, you could consider the pool being greater than just one municipality. And that may require some changes in the insurance industry, but it's just a thought for down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the challenges that I've seen, particularly in cases with managers who may be taking on their first job as a manager, or who maybe haven't worked very long as a manager and are coming into a second or third position like that, is that the contract proposal that's put in front of them, because it references the personnel manual, means that you're going to start out with no vacation, and right. You're going to have to maybe work a year before you get any vacation days. And I've talked to managers about this issue, and when I've been involved in as an interim manager and have been providing insight to village attorneys or city attorneys in negotiating a contract, I have always stepped forward and said, look, this is not what you should expect with a new manager coming in. One of the challenges is that these manager jobs are stressful jobs. They are tiring jobs. They involve oftentimes, for 45 or 50 or 60 hours a week or more to get done. And in order for a manager to stay on top of his or her game, they may need time away. They need to take vacation, and they need to set an example, in my opinion, for other employees in the organization that you need to take time away. Well, in that first year, it might be difficult to find time to get away, but I think that that's something that managers should set aside. So the old idea that you start out at the bottom and you're only going to get a week or 2 weeks of vacation after having worked there a year, I think is unacceptable. And I think managers should come in and make an argument for, I should be earning vacation at the rate of 3 weeks a year or 4 weeks a year, and I should get a bank of days at the beginning of my time here. It might be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is, because I will need to take time off as I go along here just to stay fresh.
Yeah, and I've seen similar kinds of things in contracts where they might give an initial bank of 80 hours, let's say, but that without some kind of exception in there, you can't access that for the first 90 days. But the problem that creates is, especially if you're looking at municipalities trying to attract an experienced manager who's coming from another municipality, they may have a trip planned, a cruise or something like that they have put money into that's coming up, 4, 5, 6 months or whatever into their new job. And so that's something that, it's to the benefit of the municipality, of course, to recognize that. And I think for the manager to disclose that as well when they're doing their negotiations.
Yeah, and I think managers should recognize that, like with other municipal employees, there's not a large pool of candidates for many positions, and so if you've been offered the job, the employer, the municipality wants you to take it, and they are. I think you're in a better position to negotiate a package of benefits that's beneficial to you, as long as you're within the realm of reason. Just because of the fact that vacation days don't cost them anything. There's no apart from the fact that you're not around the office. I think you come in and say, I need 6 weeks off during my first year. That's somebody might raise some eyebrows about how serious you are about wanting to work. But I think that it's certainly an area where if you're reasonable about what you're asking for, I think there are opportunities to come in and justify it, particularly like with a bank of sick days or a bank of vacation days, to say, look, I might very well catch a cold or get the flu or something during my first year here. I don't want to have to wait until I've been here a year to get any sick time, paid time off for being ill, and you don't want me showing up at the work, showing up at the office if I'm sick. And the same is with vacation. I've got a family vacation that's planned. We go to the lake every single year during this week, and we have for 5 years. We don't want to give that up, and it's a part of saying this is a part of my own stress reduction and mental health and general wellness to be able to take those days. So I think ask for reasonable amounts of vacation, but make sure to ask for a bank of days so that you're not going your first year without an opportunity to take any time off. I think if we're not superheroes when we enter into this. We do need that time off. I felt, and I will confess, I had long periods of time when I didn't take as many vacation days as what I should have, and it took a toll on me in terms of my productivity. And I finally learned I need to set a better example for my staff and get out of the office once in a while and stay away from thinking about work for a few days at a time. We should talk a little bit about pension and 401 kinds of programs as well here. I'm not. There are still some municipalities that are offering defined benefit pension plans.
Yes.
Those can be challenging for managers, and the reason that there are alternatives that are out there is that in some instances it has been difficult in the past to become vested in those plans. If you feel comfortable that you're going to be there long enough to get vested, then there certainly would be some benefit in pursuing a pension. When I first started out in this business, there wasn't a choice, but there was shortly after, and then I went without pensions the rest of the time. And as it happens, I worked in 2 municipalities where I would have vested benefits with them. So but you don't know whether that's going to be the case. And so the deferred compensation plans, the 401A plans and others that are available to managers are certainly good options. Once again, I think it's an area where You want to know what the municipality has been offering to its employees, to its department heads, to its previous manager, and make the decision as to what's in your best interest to as far as how they're going to be making contributions. One of the areas that you'll oftentimes see is that employers they have matching programs, so they're going to match, dollar for dollar or $2 for dollar for a contribution into a 401 plan, for example. That's not something that you necessarily have to take, and you can very well negotiate a provision that says that the municipality is going to contribute 12% of salary or 15% of salary, and there is no match required for that. And that's all just a matter of, making the numbers work for you.
Right. Well, I think it's becoming increasingly important to have a plan, not just managers, but in other business and industries, looking at portability of those kinds of things, because those, the old standby pensions just aren't the same. It may not exist at all. So I think you have to look at that portability, certainly. And then we look at just in jobs in general. I think that the last statistic I recall is the average American worker is changing jobs every 3 years. Mm-hmm. So you have to have some kind of portability, or at least some ability to put away some of your salary into a 401 or 457 or whatever it might be.
We'll return to Manager Brothers' lessons learned in a moment. Do you have a topic you would like Gregg and Jae to explore? Are you interested in being a guest on Lessons Learned? Do you have comments about this episode? You can write Gregg and Jae using the contact form at greggllc.com/lessons. That's greggllc.com/lessons.
The one other area that occurred to me to talk about, and Jay, you might have some that I've not looked at, but one of the areas that oftentimes will come up in manager contracts has to do with whether the municipality is going to provide a car or a car allowance. And I've been in both situations. I prefer a car allowance. And the thing about it that I think many managers don't recognize, and even some of the councils don't recognize, is that car allowance is a way of padding the compensation package, the income package in particular, by putting dollars there that don't show up in the bottom line for when they're reporting a salary. And so there is some actual public relations benefit to a municipality to offer some additional compensation by putting it into a car allowance. And I think a few years ago car allowances might have been in the $250 or $350 range, but I've seen them go up into $500, $750 range for managers, depending on the contract. And that's not necessarily directly related to the cost of owning and keeping a car and maintaining a car and putting gas in it and all the rest.
Yeah, I guess I have some mixed feelings about that too. I mean, in most of the places, at least you've got mileage reimbursement, which follows the federal IRS guidelines for mileage, but that's certainly not the same as a car allowance or having a vehicle as well. So I'm not sure how that all calculates into your earned income too, and how as far as tax liability.
Well, and there is a tax liability to it. It shows up as a part of compensation when you get your form at the end of the year. It's just lumped in there with your compensation basically. Mm-hmm. You're going to pay, and unless you're tracking the miles that you use your personal vehicle for that relate to work and use that as a deduction, you're going to pay tax on the income tax on the entire amount. I always thought it was just a nuisance, and so I probably gave to keep track of my miles that I used for business, and so I paid Uncle Sam more than I needed to when it came to tax liability. But now, there are applications that you can get that make it handy to keep track of, and you can actually very easily track when you're driving your vehicle and what business trips it's being used for. So if you have to take a trip to the capital city on business, then that's something you can use that as a legitimate business deduction for when you're reporting your taxes. You just have to keep track of it. But I never did that. There's another thing that goes along with it, by the way, and this is a personal thing. I always felt that if the municipality were paying me a car allowance, that I had an obligation to drive a decent car. I oftentimes don't care what kind of car I drive, and I'm certainly never going to be driving a Cadillac. But by the same token, I think that if you're using your car for business, and that sometimes involves taking visitors to the community around town, you want to have a reasonably decent car, in my opinion. Some managers might feel differently about that and drive whatever car they've had that has 300,000 miles on it or whatever. Or Jay, the truck that you typically drive. There's a little bit of an inside. Jay, you might want to describe what your primary vehicle is.
Well, and I probably should qualify this. I bought this. It was a pre-owned vehicle, and I bought this when I was gutting a kitchen, doing a kitchen remodel in my personal home anyway. And I could not get a roll-off dumpster in my driveway because there were some low power lines. I couldn't get a company that would bring one in, so I went to a car lot and found a vehicle that was the right price and drove, was in good mechanical condition. However, this was a former, in its previous life, was a fleet vehicle for a construction contractor. And so fleet vehicles oftentimes have some unusual features. This one is canary yellow. So I refer to it as my Tweety Mobile, but it's served me well. I can't complain about that. It does make it pretty obvious when when I was a village manager, when I was in the office, people could drive by and they knew that Jay was there. So because nobody else in town had a canary yellow truck. The nice thing about it is I've never failed to be able to locate that when I've been in a large mall or big box store parking lot or whatever. When I come out with my hands full of things, I can always spot my vehicle. So
and you don't have to worry about anybody stealing it.
No, you could leave the keys in it probably. So anyway,
Jay, getting back to our topic.
Yes.
Before we run out of time entirely,
yes.
Are there any other benefits that kind of benefit issues that kind of come to your mind that we haven't already covered that we ought to take up today?
Well, one that's kind of a minor thing that I've seen in a couple of municipalities, and probably in most municipalities have this now, is a cell phone allowance. Historically, when cell phones came out, municipalities might have their own cell phones, but then it became an issue where managers were carrying their personal cell phone and had their municipality cell phone with them. Yeah. And so then the other issue is employees tend not to take as great a care of a municipal cell phone as they would their own personal cell phone, and maybe the municipalities don't change cell phones as frequently as the employees would like to. So the answer is to give a cell phone allowance and let the employee take responsibility for keeping their cell phone, and just have a monthly stipend that defrays part of the cost of carrying the cell phone. And when, in my experience, and I'm not sure how this is justified necessarily, but department heads and managers might get a higher monthly stipend than your line employees did. But that's something to certainly be negotiated, I guess. So.
Sure. And I have certainly seen that kind of a provision in manager contracts. All right, Jay, well, let's wrap this up. Do you have a sponsor for us today?
I do, Greg. Today's episode was sponsored by, listen carefully, Abercrombie and Fish of upstate New York. This is a world-class wilderness outfitter. They specialize in taking you to a fishing destination of your choice. They provide everything you need for an adventurous getaway, including lodging. So you go to Abercrombie and Fish's website, input your preferred start dates and duration of your adventure. Abercrombie and Fish does the rest to make your dream itinerary come to life.
And is the Uber that's a part of that name, does that mean like the greatest ever as opposed to any relationship to the ride sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the way we're going to address that anyway.
All right. I just want to make sure. I'm sorry. Did I jump in ahead of you?
But no, and you might think back to when we were kids, and you, I think, agreed to take possession of a goldfish in your classroom and brought it home. And do you remember the name that Dad gave that?
It was Abercrombie is what he named it.
Abercrombie, but it was and it was interesting because I don't know that Dad ever, up to that point, had ever been to New York City. So to say that Abercrombie and Fitch,
that was a well-known retailer during that period of time. It's been around for a long, long time.
Right.
But yeah, that was after my kindergarten year. So we had a goldfish in my kindergarten classroom, and I think my teacher knew that I was moving after the end of that class that year and moving to a different community, and so she rewarded me with this goldfish, which I then in the goldfish bowl, and I walked to school. I had to carry that thing home.
Yes.
I'm surprised it made it.
Yes, but anyway, so that was just what reminded me when I heard about this Abercrombie and Fish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, well, what's coming up next, Jay?
Well, I think we need to try to wrap up talking about contracts as it pertains to municipal managers. Try to cover. We've touched on a number of other loose ends, I guess I want to say. So let's try to tie up those loose ends, and we'll conclude this part of the discussion with the fourth episode of dealing with contracts.
Yeah, and I think some of the loose ends that we want to tie up are what I would call the fine print items. That sometimes can get overlooked. Some of that boilerplate, what appears to be boilerplate language, some of those things are worth taking a look at and making sure that they are not disadvantageous to the manager. They're the things that can be real traps for the manager if things go south with a municipality. All right. Well, I think we've subjected our listeners to enough for one episode.
All right. Well, very good.
We'll talk again soon.
All right. Have a good day.
Yep. You too.
Thank you for listening today. We hope you enjoyed the show. Manager Brothers Lessons Learned is a production of Gregg Guidance, LLC, a multi-specialty consulting firm offering interim management, group process facilitation, workflow analysis, operational studies, and more to local governments in Michigan and beyond.